Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. As part of a comprehensive news analysis, today we'll be discussing 6 to 7 important articles out of the Hindu newspaper. But before we begin, a very important announcement for you that on 2nd September at 6 p.m. in the evening, Sarmat sir will be taking a very important workshop on a complete guidance to qualify your CSE examination, the first attempt. So very simply, for CSE 2024, how can you complete everything in your first attempt and make sure that you qualify? He'll be telling you the basic pointers, and a very important discussion is going to happen on 2nd September at 6 p.m. So do register for it, and the link is given in the description below. With this, let's look at the 7 topics we cover today. First, we'll talk about rice, which has been in the news quite a lot now, and a panic which is going throughout the US sector itself. Then we'll talk about a reform which is being brought in SIM cards itself. Then Aditya L1, not specifically the mission itself, but the engines which are going to be used. And then a UN agency report which gives a very interesting paradox, but an unfortunate paradox for India generally. And then we'll move to 3 very simple topics. Species which is in the news, thereafter the PLI scheme, the production link incentive scheme, and last but not the least, with Fukushima in the news again, an interesting question as to how do you actually store nuclear spent fuel, which we'll discuss what it is. This you will not find in any other edition other than Delhi edition. This is a very specific page which comes as page number 2, Roman 2 in the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper. With this, let's start our first discussion. Good morning to all of you. Is understanding what is happening with rice. Now, again, as always, I'll give you the basic details, then we'll move into the nitty-gritty, and in the end, we'll try to summarize everything. So the first point is that India is a very sizable exporter. As of right now, 45% of all the rice which is in the world market is actually exported by India, and it is one of the largest rice exporters in the world. Now, we export 2 types of rice. One is called non-basmati white rice, and the other one is basmati rice. With regards to basmati rice, you would need a GI tag to actually very simply send it to a country saying that it is basmati rice. And there are certain 7 to 8 different regions and different players which have the GI tag also. Now, when we talk about the export ban, let's try to contextualize everything, how it is come about and why it is that this is the case itself. So, when we talk about non-basmati white rice, you have 2-3 types in this, which is a whole grain, that you have a whole grain, or it is called one which has been broken. So, you have a smaller size grain and a bigger size grain, and basmati is known to be a very, very big size and very fragrant in that regard. Now, the Rabi and the Kharif season, in both seasons we see the sowing of rice itself, but this time something very problematic has happened in both these seasons when it comes to paddy or rice in that regard. The Rabi season, there was a 13.8% reduction in production, which is actually a very big amount when you look at the tonnage of India generally. So 13.8% decline in production itself. And in Kharif, where in Tamil Nadu there will be the Samba crop which will be actually sown, the problem is that there is a delayed sowing because of the monsoons itself. So now the problem is that there is already a decline which we see, and on the other hand, the monsoon delay means that there will be a cascading effect, a domino effect, in which the Kharif crop is also going to come to the market late, and there's already demand which is quite high. And if you then contextualize the fact that we are feeding both the domestic and international market, so for our 2 major considerations, which is food security and prices, non-basmati white rice export ban has been introduced. And over basmati, the rule is that if the consignment order is $1,200 per ton and above, then only you can export. Exporters cannot export the non-basmati white rice, which is very, very important for our food security, and more than that, to cool down the prices in the Indian market itself. So basically, we are keeping our domestic market interest over and above the international market, and that is also a good thing, because we can't be exporting rice whilst rice becomes very, very expensive in India at the same point of time. Now, there are two very interesting things which come into picture by looking at this basic data. This is the data which the article is providing you. 45%, India largest rice exporter. There are two more things which are actually at play. That Thailand, which is the next major exporter, 25% reduction in production. And more than that, Myanmar, there is a ban again on export. And the crop which is going to come out of Iran and Iraq is also going to be affected. Now, you would have seen it on Instagram or on social media that in America and in certain parts of Europe, there's a proper rush to get as much rice as possible. What we saw in COVID-19 when it came to toilet rolls, the same thing is happening vis-a-vis the Indian diasporic community and even the different actors which use Indian rice in their products to stock rice, and that has led to a very major spike in prices of non-basmati white rice in the West itself. Now, the two larger points here are that we talk about climate change. We talk about climate change, and we tend to talk about climate change and its cost. And this is one of the costs which we are technically paying. Because if our exporters in a market which has very, very volatile situation right now, and where they can fetch a lot of good, what we call as money or capital because of the demand itself, banning the export is not good for the Indian economy. However, in our food security interest, it is important. So very simply, there are two logics here, that climate change has a cost, and now we have to manage our economy or economic interest vis-a-vis our food security interest. Because very simply, if you talk to an exporter, even if the non-basmati white rice was exported at $800, $900 per ton, it would have gone in very big volumes, which would be good for the Indian economy generally, for our capital and current account deficit generally. However, the problem is that if we put this over food security, then in India the prices will go up very quickly, because then there will be a diversion of the supply away from the domestic market towards what we call as the export market. So now we are seeing that because of the Samba becoming delayed, which is intricately related to the monsoon, which is then in turn related to the climate change concept itself. With the climate change, we are now seeing that there are repercussions on the day-to-day basis. Why am I saying this? Because this is a very important relationship which you need to understand, which is of economy and environment. We tend to see both either as mutually exclusive to each other or as odds, but they are not at odds. The point is they are complementary to each other. If we do not protect the environment, we will pay an economic cost for it, and this is the economic cost we are paying for it. So very simply, this situation wherein we have an export ban of non-basmati white rice, where we're getting a very good amount in the export market, and there's already a lot of fear-mongering and a lot of panic in the West, and there's a lot of demand. We have to do this for food security and prices. Now, please pay attention to one more aspect which you can use in the examination, which is GS paper 4, wherein the ethical element comes through, that do you keep your domestic population first or economic interest first? And herein the government of India has done the best thing possible, which is to make sure that in India prices don't go out of hand, and in the long term our food security is not very simply compromised. There's also provision in this that if there are countries to which we are exporting and their food security is getting what we call as impacted or endangered, we are ready to send them non-basmati white rice. However, if it is just for the market itself, for Walmarts and for the US, it will not go in that sense. So very simply, India as of right now is choosing its domestic market, internal price and food security over its economic interest, which is related to the larger export market, which would be good because the point is we are the largest exporter, and with Thailand and Myanmar, Iran, Iraq all seeing certain impacts, we could have actually benefited out of the situation. But the problem is with the delayed sowing and the monsoon issue in the Kharif season, it is very clear that we will not be able to do the same, and we have to make sure that we are having a good buffer stock and also keep the prices in control. So two basic aspects are there. One is related to food security and prices. Second is related to the economic cost, and the larger concept is India is choosing its food security and prices over its export interest. That is it. That is the basic point. This text and context, it explains the situation, and that was what we are trying to understand. So let's now go into the details of the article, and then I'll summarize everything in the end again with a basic summary. So we have prohibited the export of white rice, levied 20% export duty on it till October 15th, permitted the export of basmati rice only if it is fetching $1,200 and above, and more than that, broken rice, which I told you, within non-basmati white rice, the smaller, the broken quality is also prohibited, and that was prohibited since last September also only. So very simply, we are making sure that we have our own stock. Now, why are we doing it? Because in the Rabi season, vis-a-vis last year, we've already seen a 13.8% decrease in the production itself from close to 184 lakh tons to 158 lakh tons. On the other hand, the second is the Kharif, wherein the Kharif sowing data is showing us that in Tamil Nadu, the Samba crop, which was usually sown in August, has been delayed because of the shortfall in the southwestern monsoon, and therefore, very simply, the El Nino effect is coming through, and this will very simply impact the larger price, and the cascading effect is going to be when does the crop enter the market is now going to be decided because of the shortfall of the monsoons and generally rain. Now, if we take this in the perspective of how we actually export, India is the largest rice exporter globally with close to 45% share in the global rice market itself. And why did we actually do it? Because India was seeing a lot of what we call as quick and exponential growth in our exports. So 21% higher as compared to last year we were exporting. Non-basmati rice shipments were again up by 7.5%. If you look at it, we were exporting 15% more than what we were previously. But with the context of Thailand having a 25% lower production, Myanmar stopped rice export itself, and Iran, Iraq also going to be impacted by climate change, we could have actually benefited out of the situation quite well. However, that is not going to happen because the consequences of what the government of India has done is that in order to make sure that the farmer does not actually fetch a bad price, MSP will be kept at the same level or higher so that the farmer does not impact, so the farmer gets the right price. For us, no steep climb in prices, and basically in the short term there may be a little bit of volatility, but in the long term we are making sure that our food security and very simply our prices are stabilized, are within the range. And I will discuss the last, which is before prelims by its section. The fourth article is very intricately related to this topic. Sometimes we take price as very given, or how much does a 50, 60 rupees or 100 rupee change actually mean, or is actually substantial or not. And I will show you a data which will actually open our eyes towards the problem of affordability. In India, affordability of rice and affordability of food is problematic, and therefore price going up very steeply or very quickly will therefore impact affordability, therefore poverty alleviation, and therefore generally the nutrition profile of India. Therefore, all of them are intricately connected. We have to make sure. So, before we go to the next topic, let me give you a basic overview of what you remember from here, and a question is there in the end with regards to this topic, and you can see whatever question can come. So very simply, you have to remember 45% share in global rice market. Rabi 13.8, if you want you can make it 14% decline. Kharif delay. This is the basic data. But what you actually have to remember is the implications, which is the rationale. Implications is more important. First is food security is the first consideration, that we have food for our economy and our domestic market. Prices are the second one, wherein if we keep on exporting, prices will start to rise. Third is the concept of how we have to choose the concept of our not economic interest but our own domestic interest over the larger economic export interest. And the next most important concept is climate cost or climate change cost. All of this is related, and it is not that we are not paying a cost for now climate change. Climate change is making us pay on the day-to-day basis. We don't realize it. So you can use it in paper 3, which is GS paper 3 for environment. You can use it for economy, and you can just intricately tell the relationship between environment and economy. So very interesting article, gives you a lot of data. Thereafter, we move to the second important topic, and that is related to SIMS. So in India, nowadays, before this major moment which has come through reforms, at one point of time, it used to be extremely difficult to get SIMs. SIMs meaning what you put in your phone to get reception. So Airtel, Vodafone, Jio, whatever it may be. So at one point of time, MTNL, BSNL being the only players, or it was very, very difficult to get SIMs, and you had to go through a whole process of very intricate verifications to actually get it. Then came the era of very easy accessibility. Today you can order vegetables, but you can also order SIM at your home. And very simply, there are multiple players who are called as point of sale or POS. So you have the franchisees, which is that you can go to a Airtel showroom or a Jio showroom and get it. You have a delivery, and then you have smaller players. Smaller players you would have seen for sure that either they have a motorcycle standing on the corner of the street itself, or a very small shop sells SIMs and gives you these different basic aspects that with certain recharge you can get certain things. Now, SIMs are a very sensitive cyber tool, or have now become a very important tool of cyber crime, in the sense because OTPs are very important. The SIM verification process and the SIM procurement process needed a reform. So you would have seen for sure there are certain cases in which you have not shared the OTP, but somehow your account was debited out of money. That happens via duplicate SIMs, in the sense that somebody copied your SIM and they got the OTP, not you. There are in moments in which SIMs are also distributed to terrorists and terrorist networks. Over and above that, most of the SIMs may be in circulation, have verified users, but there is a sizable portion of users, either their KYC details are wrong, or they have just procured the SIM from somewhere randomly, or they are actors who should not have SIMs, either antisocial or generally not in the interest of national security. There's a cyber security angle here, and there's a financial security angle here, because SIMs are used for what we call as SIM calls, which is that the bulk calling happens. So very simply, nowadays it has become a nuisance. And this the government of India identified and saw that the problem is not in the user. It's not you and me. It's not you and me who are going to actually misuse a SIM. Maximum you will go and get 3 SIMs, but you have to recharge. Now, the problem is in the point of sale. That basically, we don't know that if you and me are also selling a SIM or not. For example, SIMs come for free today. But if I go to the rural sector, where they don't have this information that SIMs are for free, I can procure 5 SIMs and go into rural India and sell those SIMs for 500. I get a profit. So basically the problem is me, which is the point of sale. Because there is no verification of me as an actor, as me as a very important intermediary, anybody can sell a SIM, everybody has access to SIM, and everybody is misusing that access. And therefore, the government of India has 3 basic interventions in this sector. First is to identify the issue. I think we all understand the issue very well because we all are part of this problem generally because we've seen it. Now, what are the 3 solutions which are in place? The second and the third is something new. The first is something which is already in place, which is called the Sanchar Sarthi. Sanchar Sarthi, I'll give you the exact spelling. The Sanchar Sathi, rather not Sarthi, Sathi. Sanchar Sathi. The Sanchar Sathi is actually an online portal. And maybe some of you would not know, you can actually go and verify your SIM. You can report theft, you can block, and you can actually check how many SIMs are working on your name. This is a very good portal, and at this point of time there is multiple FIRs which have been put in because of the way we have been able to verify people using or misusing SIMs in that sense. So therefore, Sanchar Sathi is the digital platform which allows for the online portal to work in such a way that people can verify if they have multiple names under their name or not. That is the first thing. Or multiple SIMs under their name or not. Now, the second and the third is what they have done recently, and this is why we are doing this. The first thing which the government of India has now done is that POS verification is going to become mandatory, which is point of sale verification is going to become mandatory in the sense that either if you're a franchisee or a delivery or a small player, you have to give KYC details. You also have to verify your identity. And if you fail to do so, jail and basic fines are there, close to 10 lakh rupees fines is there. So the first thing is to verify who is selling. This could make a major change because of the fact that by knowing who is selling, most of the problem gets solved, because now if you are selling without having a verification or Aadhaar authentication or a basic KYC done, then that SIM automatically becomes invalidated and it will become quicker to catch fraud. But it is a third thing which is more important, which is that now bulk sale of SIMs has now become difficult. So what used to happen was that I have a business and my business is based on, for example, calling someone. So I would go and get 100 SIMs. And the concept was that on all 100 SIMs, my KYC would be done or the KYC of the business would be done. That this business needs it, therefore all 100 SIMs are on the business. Now the point is, for example, it is in the name of ABC company. If it is in the name of the ABC company itself, the problem is that we don't know who is the end user. We don't know who is the end user, because at the end of the day, who is using that SIM in the name of ABC, we don't know. So bulk sale of SIMs was a problem. And herein what the government of India has done is that now they are going to do 2 things. Firstly, a POS, a point of sale, cannot sell a bulk SIM. You would have to go to an authorized seller who has the capacity to do it. But more than that, the business would have to verify all of the end users via KYC. Very simply, if I am an employee of a company, ABC company, and I am getting a SIM in the name of ABC company, now my KYC will also be done and it will go to this portal that I am using a SIM in my name, but it is registered with the ABC company and I'm working for the ABC company. This is a game changer because bulk SIMs were the real problem. That you make companies which are fake, take a lot of SIMs and then use it for either fraud purposes, financial theft, cyber crime, or basic what we call as national security activities or terrorist activities. And therefore, ABC company now has to verify each and every end user. So, before we go into the nitty-gritty, multiple things are there. 4 basic things. India, you have your Sanchar Sathi, which is an online portal to help you catch fraud automatically. Second is POS was the problem. Where are you selling it? Who is selling it? That was the question. And herein 2 reforms. POS verification, KYC details, and bulk sale of SIMs now has become difficult with end user verification. This is the 2 basic changes, reforms which have been brought in. This was already in place. So I hope that you understand what is the new landscape of SIMs or SIM verification, and this could be a game changer for a lot of different sectors in that regard. So on 17th August, the Union Minister for Telecommunications has revised or has put in new reforms for SIM verification and SIM cards generally. And very simply, there will be now procurement of SIMs only from what we call as authorized registered POS or point of sale players who have a license or are authorized by the franchisee, and bulk procurement of SIM cards are going to become problematic. So, we already have Sanchar Sathi, which allows for citizens to check connections registered against their name, block mobile phones, report fraud and unrequired connections, verify the genuineness of a device via the IMEI number. Now, throughout, because of Sanchar Sathi, close to 114 crore active mobile connections have been checked and analyzed, and out of which close to 1700 dealers and 300 FIRs have been registered for dealers who were doing fraud or fraudulent activities generally. Now, what are the new reforms? The first reform is that it will be mandatory for all franchisee agents and distributors of SIMs, all POS, to register with licenses with the telecommunication network operator or with the government of India. There will most probably it is going to be the operator, for example Jio or Airtel, which is going to give the license and verify, because for the government of India it is going to become very problematic, and the onus is on the operator to carry out the verification of the POS, and police verification is going to be mandatory. Existing SIM cards which have been issued by the POS for the past 12 months will now need to comply with all the new regulations, and if the POS is found to be very simply involved in illegal activities, blacklisted for 3 years, 10 lakh rupees penalty, which is not that big a deterrent, but you can't keep it unreasonable. This is the first reform. The second reform is SIM cards, wherein bulk SIM card procurement is going to become problematic, because now you will get a business connection which will allow you to give further SIM cards rather than getting bulk SIM cards for businesses, and there will be a need for KYC completion of the end user. All end users need to be very simply verified, and even when we talk about any form of Aadhaar fraud, biometric and demographic details would need to be done through QR code scanning, and maybe they will also ask for your fingerprints, and therefore subscribers would have to undergo an entire KYC process for replacing a SIM also, and for 24 hours there will be a bar on calling anybody also. So very simply, SIM card landscape, the way we see telecommunications, there's a major reform. So let me give you a summary of what we've done till this point. First, we understood the concept of what we call as how SIMs are becoming a nuisance in India. Over and above, there are multiple POS agents which we don't know about. So first is Sanchar Sathi. Please do remember the name of this portal. very important for prelims and mains generally. Over and above that, we can also see that there are two major reforms. POS have to be verified, police verification, and bulk SIM procurement needs now end user verification. Over and above that, the bulk SIM procurement can now not happen through physical SIMs, but a business account will be opened and SIMs will be allocated after each and everybody's or every user's KYC done. And even when you lose your SIM for 24 hours, everything will be blocked so that nobody can use it or misuse it in that regard. And before that, we tried to understand rice and how it is the economic cost of climate change, wherein we have a 14% reduction. Over and above that, the samba crop has been very simply delayed, so there could have been a cascading effect. Food security would have very simply got jeopardized, and therefore we are trying to protect that in that sense. Food security, prices, two things we are trying to protect vis-a-vis the interest of the exporters. Now, I hope these two are totally clear to you. Now comes Aditya L1, which is in the news quite a lot nowadays because this is the next major, what we call as, and we hope, successful mission of ISRO. And Aditya L1 is going to be quite unique in the sense that after Chandrayaan 3, which is the study of the moon, now we are going for the study of the sun. And what the article actually talks about is the importance of what is called LAM, which is the liquid apogee motor. You would have seen LAM at work because the way the propulsion system works, the Chandrayaan 3 orbit, the lander Vikram had LAM under it, which actually managed the landing itself. If you've seen the paper itself, on the front page you have a very beautiful picture of Vikram taken by Pragyan itself. So very simply, LAM plays a very important role in landing, and generally now we have the understanding of doing soft landings with it. So LAM, liquid apogee motor, is very important. You would have seen that small nozzles like this come out of the lander, and therefore this is nothing but LAM. Multiple 4 LAMs were there, together one propulsion system they are called. Now, when we talk about Aditya L1, the problem, and I'm just giving you a basic overview, the problem is not with the fact that it has to be a what we call as soft landing. It's not that. The problem is that it will take close to 4 months for Aditya L1, once it is in orbit, once it is launched, once it is in orbit, it will take 4 months to reach what is called L1, Lagrange 1. The word L1, very simply, there are, according to standard theories of relativity and gravitational models, there are basically L1 to L5, Lagrange points, Lagrange 1 to Lagrange 5. Now please try to understand this point. What is this L1 thing? Because the name Aditya L1 is very important. Lagrange point is very simply a point where the gravitational forces of two celestial bodies is such that neither is pulling towards each other. Very simply, if there is the sun and if there is the earth, if I am, for example, here, the sun will pull me or will change my orbit because of its gravitational force. If I am here, then I will be pulled by the earth's gravitational force. So very simply, to remain in, for example, this type of orbit or this type of orbit, I would need propulsion systems, a motor and an engine throughout the life of the mission to make sure that I am not simply going inside or being pulled by the gravitational force of the sun or the earth. And it is believed that very simply, with two celestial bodies, there will always be 5 points at which the gravitational force of both of them get cancelled, and this becomes a Lagrange point, L1. So very simply, vis-a-vis the sun and the earth, L1, L2, L4, L5, L3. Basically, these are the 5 points. If the Aditya L1 orbiter is put in, it will not need any form of propulsion system to remain in orbit. Here, very simply, the gravitational forces are getting cancelled. They are getting cancelled, and therefore it can remain in that halo orbit it wants to. So very simply what Aditya L1 is going to do, it is going to be launched, then it will start to increase its orbit, then go into cruise phase, then do a maneuver and go into L1 point. L1 point, Aditya L1 will very simply go into a halo, what we call as orbit, in which it will make sure that it is always looking towards the sun, because it's a sun-based mission itself. Now, we could have chosen L2, or a question would be, sir, why did not take L2? The problem is L2 is on the other side of the earth, and L2 is very famously occupied by NASA and its most important telescope, which is James Webb telescope, one of the most important telescopes nowadays, which is doing a lot of research on the deep space. And this is a good point. L2 is a good point because, very simply, because of the shadow of the earth and because the James Webb telescope is looking like this, the sun is not interfering with the what we call as IR or even X-ray or UV equipment, which is trying to do deep space research. But for us, L1 is important because we don't need to do research on the other side but towards the sun. And therefore, Aditya L1 is being chosen at L1 because L1 firstly is a point where the gravitational forces get cancelled and it has to study the sun itself. There are three things which you need to know. One is a halo orbit. What is the concept of Lagrange point? And this is basically considered a parking spot. You can park here, you can park here, you can park here, and basically there is no pulling force. Both pulling forces are getting, it's an equilibrium as it is called. So just to point this out, Lagrange point is a position in space where the gravitational forces of two bodies create pockets of gravitational equilibrium. They can be used by a spacecraft to stay docked in a single position without requiring to burn fuel. Now comes the concept of LAM. Then what is this LAM? See, the main challenge which Vikram had, or for example Chandrayaan 3 had, was soft landing, wherein the AIL, which is the autonomous, the AIS rather, the autonomous landing gear had to see where it is landing. It had to very simply change the throttling of the engine itself. Here what is going to happen is that between exiting Earth's orbit and reaching the halo point, the LAM will be put in, like in the Mangalyaan mission, in a hibernation mode, wherein the propulsion is not needed and it will go into hibernation. Very simply, we'll put it into standby. Now the problem is that once it will reach at the halo point, in Mangalyaan that was the biggest issue, will the propulsion system automatically wake up or not? It's about the waking up of the process, because here then it would need certain amount of fuel to go into L1 point. If it does not wake up, then what is going to happen is that it will keep on continuing on this path itself. So the fourth month, when we will be reaching L1 point, it is there where we need to actually pay attention, because then ISRO is going to set in an input where LAM is basically off and it will automatically switch itself on itself. So therefore, this is the problem, and this is the major scary moment. Unlike Chandrayaan 3 where it was the landing, here it is about the waking up of the systems itself. So I've discussed three very important steps with you. First is the Lagrange point, which is gravitational equilibrium. Second is LAM itself, wherein this is an apogee motor which was used to land Chandrayaan 3 module, or what we call as Vikram. Third is the most important, which is why is it so problematic, or what is the crucial element in Aditya L1, wherein after 3 months we would have to switch on the LAM system. If it does not switch off, then the mission is a failure, and we hope that it will switch on itself after 3 months or 4.5 months, wherein it will automatically do the maneuver and go into L1. Therefore, from the moon, we will now start to study the sun. So, I'll give you the basic details to the PPT also, and we can then move on to the fourth topic. So, LAM is an acronym for a very important motor or very important engine which is on the Aditya L1 module itself. It was used in Chandrayaan 3 also. So it has been developed by Liquid Propulsion System Centers or LPSC of ISRO itself, and it was used in 2014 vis-a-vis Mangalyaan, and recently for Chandrayaan 3 also. In simple terms, LAM engines are used for orbital adjustment maneuvers. Simply, it's a small engine on board which can very simply change the orbit or give certain force. They're called Newton engines, wherein they can apply force on the satellite so as to push it into certain orbits in them. Now, the Aditya L1 mission is a space-based observatory mission for Indian solar mission, and LAM is going to play a very important role. But what is the problematic aspect here? What is the challenging part here? Is firstly, LAM will be used to brake. First is braking. Because it is going in a certain trajectory, it has to brake and then do this maneuver. So first is going to be the braking phase. But for that braking to happen, it has to wake up. And therefore, once it goes into hibernation, which is from the earth phase till the braking phase, the system needs to get basically automatically switched on, and that is the waking up of LAM. And we believe and we hope that in Mangalyaan mission it automatically switched on itself, and we hope that LAM is going to again go out of hibernation into wake up mode to become and very simply make this mission equally a big success as Chandrayaan 3. So 3 basic static concepts for you: LAM, which is liquid apogee motor, a propulsion system which is on the orbiter, on the satellite itself, used for orbital maneuvers. Then we discuss the concept of Lagrange point, 5 points between 2 celestial bodies where there is equilibrium, where they are cancelling their gravitational forces, and therefore satellite can be parked in that sector and it will never need to use very simply any form of fuel to remain there. And last but not the least, solar mission, to understand the sun itself. And why did we not take L2? Because NASA already parked James Webb there. We wanted L1 because it looks towards the sun. They wanted L2 because it looks towards deep space. That is the basic point. I hope you understand this also equally well. Then the last major topic which we do is a very problematic report. It's a disheartening report which has come out in the form of State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World, SOFI report, which has been developed by FAO and the United Nations agencies together. And the conclusions are not that good. This is a very good feature in Hindu, wherein it's called data point, where they give you a lot of data and analyze it for you also. So let's try to analyze this data. This is a very important chart. This gives you what we call as purchasing power parity, PPP, dollar worth of how much money do you need to buy a healthy diet. For example, I decide that a healthy diet, for example, healthy diet means 1 fruit, 1 chapati, 1 bowl of rice and 1 simple vegetable. For example, we believe that this is a healthy diet. If we want, we can make here bread and rice is common. Now, the problem is that if you compare countries and how much would it cost to buy this, every country has a different currency and the exchange also differs. So the exchange rate is not the same, therefore there's a difference. So that type of comparison makes no sense. So very simply, in order to make it straightforward, or in order to compare 2 nations or multiple nations, we go into what is called PPP, purchasing power parity, wherein the concept is 1 PPP dollar in the United States should be able to buy the same amount of goods in either India or Brazil. Very simply, $1 under PPP should be able to buy in all countries the same thing. And that is why X PPP dollar per person per day means how much money would it need, very simply, to buy a very simple healthy diet in every country. So the first concept is to understand the PPP concept, wherein the PPP model, 1 PPP dollar, very simply is to compare countries, and 1 PPP dollar will buy you exactly the same thing either in Brazil, in Egypt, in Russia, in Pakistan, in India, in Nepal, in Bhutan, everywhere. Now, the first data which comes out is that India, compared to its other countries or other regional countries or the world itself, has the lowest PPP dollar for a healthy diet. Very simply, you only have to spend $3.1 PPP to buy a healthy diet or a healthy food diet in India. Compared to, for example, Bhutan, where it is going to $6, or you have Bangladesh, UAE, Brazil, higher than India. India, very simply, has one of the cheapest healthy diets in the world. Good thing, very good thing, which means that our food security is in a good position and we can very simply keep the prices in control. So, $3.1 PPP, purchasing power parity, vis-a-vis other countries, meaning I will buy, for example, in $3.1 PPP, one fruit, one bread, one rice and one vegetable. And in Bhutan, I would need $4.5 to buy the same thing. That is the basic point. And in, for example, Bangladesh, you would need $3.2. So the same amount of things, how much do you need to spend? This is a very encouraging point, that a healthy diet in India is cheap. However, the problem is the next chart, which tells us that 74% of the Indian population cannot afford $3.1 PPP. 74% were not able to afford a healthy diet, and the fourth highest share in the countries itself. When it comes to a percentage of population which cannot afford a healthy diet, India comes fourth. So though we have the cheapest in the region healthy diet, we have 74% of the population not able to afford that cheap diet. This is the irony here. This is the irony, that because of income stagnation, because of poor income levels, because of general stagnation in, or what we call as, the incomes in India, very simply, people are not able to afford the cheapest healthy diet in the world. Imagine that. So these two charts represent two different spectrums altogether. We are the cheapest healthy diet, which is a very good thing, that we don't have to spend too much to get a healthy diet. But 74% of our population cannot afford it only, which is the problem here. This is a systemic issue. This puts questions over the concept of poverty alleviation. Any data you give me, and if you say 74% of the population cannot buy a good diet, a healthy diet, then what is the point? So if I actually come to the conclusions I can draw from these two charts, there were two more charts which are irrelevant to us. The share of people who are able to afford such a healthy diet is still low. India features at the bottom of the list since income levels have become stagnated. A very good example of this would be that while in Mumbai the cost of meals have risen by 65% in the last 5 years, wages and salaries have only risen by 28 to 37%. So very simply, it shows that our prices are rising, but our incomes are not rising. And therefore, though we have the cheapest food in the world, we still have a sizable majority of India can't afford. It's not that they can't afford food. It's about a nutritional healthy diet which was decided by the FA on the UN what means as a traditional diet. It means people may have maybe only 28% or for example 25% of India does not have access to food. But 74% does not have access to nutritional food. These are two very different things. A food which has all the nutritions, it has all the vitamins, it has all the good things for you, a healthy diet. And then there's a food which is bare minimum giving you calories. For example, it is giving you 2800 calories, it is giving you 2000 calories. These two are very different things. Giving calories and nutrition are two very different things. So don't generalize it to say that poverty is there, 74% are below the poverty line. No, that is not the below poverty line would be based on calories. Here it is not calories, it is the concept of healthy diet. Healthy, that is the most important point, healthy diet. So please interpret this data in the right way also and don't misinterpret it. 74% of India cannot afford a healthy diet. They can afford food, they can afford the calories. Maybe there is only 10% or 5% poverty in India, but when it comes to nutritional issues, 74% don't have the money to push in $3.1 PPP, basically to get a good nutritional diet across their lifetime, which is the problematic aspect here. So incomes have to go forward as much as prices. Very simply, inflation is becoming so much that as it is, money value starts to fall and people's income is not keeping at pace with inflation itself, and therefore you have this type of contradiction in India. So there could be multiple people earning a good salary, but they still don't have the salary to actually afford a healthy diet in that regard, which is the problematic aspect. So before we go to Prelims Bytes section, 4 basic articles we've done, very fundamental things we've done. The term Sanchar Sathi is important for you. 2 major changes in POS and bulk. Then LAM, liquid apogee motor, L1, Lagrange point concept. Further, we have to understand why rice export has been stopped, wherein comes the Rabi issue, wherein there is a decline, and the concept of Kharif, wherein very simply delay. And we are 45% share, largest exporter of rice in the world. And last but not the least is we have the cheapest healthy diet in the world, but 74% of India cannot afford this diet itself. That is the irony, that is the biggest unfortunate aspect here. So with this, let's look at the smaller, simpler topics. First, you have a species which is in the news. We don't have to go into the Wildlife Conservation Society report itself, but very simply the red sand boa. It's a snake which has now become one of the most smuggled snake across India itself and even across international borders. So illegal trade in the red sand boa between 2016 and 2021 has collated to basically have close to 172 incidents of seizure and what we call as illegal trade. But what is more important for you generally is, it is according to the newspaper, not according to me. The IUCN status can always change. Because of decreasing population and its habitat gone, it is a near threatened under IUCN red list. Just need to remember this. Red sand boa, IUCN status, near threatened. That's it. Thereafter, second is the PLI scheme, which is the production linked incentive scheme. We've gone through it quite a lot of times. Just to refresh your memory, it's a concept of basically cashback or subsidy. If you meet a production linked output target, you get a subsidy for the next unit, therefore production linked incentive. So if you're meeting a certain target and then also trying to export it and adding to the Indian economy, you will get a subsidy or a certain type of incentive on that output above a certain threshold. So for the IT hardware sector, PLI, we have got to know that very simply Dell, HP, 2 very big players have shown a lot of interest in using this PLI scheme to very simply become a new player in India. Under it, we give 5% incentive on local procurements. This would offset the other higher costs of procuring other things in India. We already know that there's a systematic ban which is going to come on laptops, tablets when it comes to export. But very simply, the 5% incentive is to make sure that they produce, at least assemble in India. It is subsidy for assembly, tablet, PC, servers, local laptops. The simple point is it's about assembly. It incentivizes them to basically produce in India and assemble in India. Fundamentally does not add to technology transfer, but creates more jobs at the local level. Last but not the least is Fukushima. So Fukushima, we already know, was in the news. The Prime Minister just ate a fish which was out of the area in which the Fukushima water, treated radioactive water, was released, so as to show that there is no issue, it is all fine. But the point is, it creates a fundamental question for your static, which is how do you dispose of nuclear waste? And there are 2 types of disposals which are in the news or which have been talked about. One is the temporary option, which is to basically store the spent fuel, which is that once the uranium has been spent, the rods are of no purpose, they have gone through the fission process itself, they are of no purpose, but they're still radioactive. You put it into pools, cool them down, then put it into dry caskets, and then keep them on the surface or the subsurface level. And the problem is that this has to be done in such a way that it does not permeate through the casket into the ground, because then it will add radioactivity to the ground itself, which will lead to major problematic health issues to the people who are living around it. This is the basic point of very simply finding a temporary solution. Something which is happening in Finland, and by 2025 maybe the Onkalo repository will open, which is that long-term concept is going to be that in order to keep radioactivity down, keep it away from the people, is to put it into deep geological, what we call as formations, very deep crevices, and then fill it up and then put it in such a way that it cannot impregnate, or very simply cannot leach into the soil itself. This is happening in Finland, where it's about bigger geological formations. Both have their issues, and that is why nuclear fuel and nuclear power has now also become problematic, because yes, it can produce clean fuel initially. What do you do with the waste itself? So this will give you an answer to the two temporary solutions, which is to keep it in cascades, subsurface, surface level, do not allow it to leach into the soil, and then other would be a long-term program wherein geological formations in India are used to store that, but still the issue remains the same. If it leaches through these cascades, then therefore radioactivity will start to pollute the water, soil, and even the air in that sector. So we've done 7 articles. We've discussed rice, we've discussed Lagrange point, we've discussed Aditya 11 in that way, we've discussed the SIM reforms, and over and above that we've also discussed how very simply there's an endangered species in the news, the PLI scheme, and last but not the least, nuclear fuel, how you should store it. With this, let's take the mains questions. Discuss the need and rationale behind the export ban on non-basmati white rice in the present context. This question can be changed as per when you're giving the examination, but you need to know the rationale and the need for GS paper 3. Then, what is Sanchar Sathi? Very standard, straightforward question. Discuss the recent efforts to curb cybercrime and fraud in this sector. Here you need to talk about the 2 reforms generally. So with this, I will see you next week. Thank you. Take care. I hope all of this is making sense to you and all these 7 topics are clear. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. And do register for the workshop for 2nd September. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.